Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Akumbu, and today I will be sharing with you the relevance elements that are found in the Black Panther movie, analyzed using the Akumbu TAUP model and the Akumbu CIA framework. So before we dive into the model and the framework, I argue that there is a gap between movies that are made for people of color and the actual culture of the people that the movies are supposed to be representing. It is usually told, the stories of characters is usually told for a global audience with financial gain as the driving factor instead of cultural authenticity or cultural credibility, or you could say cultural relevance. So the Akumbu CIA framework is the cultural integration and augmentation framework, which is a holistic framework that leverages elements from the character's culture and context and integrates them into the system for the purpose of rendering the system more culturally relevant. As you can see here, I have highlighted the significant, the things that I think are significant in looking at the character and developing the character as far as the framework is concerned, but it is not limited. You look at the culture, look at the story, look at the context. So the Akumbu framework was originally created from research done in the Kisi tribe, studying elements of that culture, which could be integrated into the education system to render it more culturally relevant. So I'm just using this model to study the movie Black Panther, which I absolutely love. So this model enables proper representation of the community, the culture, the psychological being of the people groups, while accepting, respecting, acknowledging, and acknowledging the validity of diversity in speech, thinking styles, attitudes, and more. So the Akumbu TAUP model, the key components of this model are processing information transferred or to be adopted through the lens of culture and context, collaborating with stakeholders in the transfer and adoption process, and promoting the symbiotic relationship that exists between stakeholders, local context or community, and the culture at large. So if we go back one more step, the model here in layman terms basically helps the researcher or the leader or the writer decide if something that is done in one culture can be adopted into another culture, and if so, how can it be done tastefully or in a way that does not diminish the original culture. Or if I am going to transfer something to a different culture, how do I do it in a way that does not diminish the other person's culture? So that is the line of thinking for that. And there's a symbiotic relationship when it comes to in film that we're talking about, the audience, the writer, and the investors. So these three have to work in sync. So just diving into culture, culture has multiple elements, which I do not have the time to go into right now. But the first part of the movie, when you think about it, the opening of the movie is oral tradition and storytelling, how it is beautifully elaborated with the voice of the kid wanting to know, wanting the father to tell him a story, and a story of home particularly. So the way it's done, it's very, I can relate to it as a young girl growing up in a village and having story nights. So, right. So it's not exactly this word, but we also had an opening, and it will be when you hear those words, you knew that it was story time. And it was done in the traditional language. Yes, I will spare you that for now. If you want to hear more, you get to reach out. So in the framework and the model continue, the TAUP model is a transfer and adoption of universal principles. So in our, you see that the universal principle of storytelling has been adopted here. So an opening of a movie, of a story, when it's time to tell a story, is not unique just to Africans, it's unique across different culture. So it's even though it might come across as we are adopting, we're not necessarily adopting or transferring in this sense. We are using a system that is commonplace to tell a story that is African based, right? Which we all know Wakanda, the story of Wakanda is situated on the continent of Africa. I've already explained to you the symbiotic relationship between the audience, the local culture, the investors, and even the writers, you know, and which can be transferred or adopted in film. In this graph, you will see that the story, there is weaponry, there is technology, there is language, and it's considering the audience, the context, the investors, the culture. All of that has to be, they all have to work together, or they did work together for this film to be the beautiful film that it is. All right, a lot of technical issues there, but let's continue. So the CIA model, without going through every single thing that I saw in the movie or walking you through all the steps, I'm jumping to the end to just offer you some of the things that I found in the movie. So the culture and the context is predominantly African. The African cultural elements in it. There's the use of technology. The story is augmented from a comic or adapted from a comic. And yes, I have not read the comics, so I'm sure there are people that are experts in the comics part of the story. So I would not discuss too much on that, but I just wanted to highlight that in telling an African story, they were able to smoothly adapt technology into the story to make it, augmenting it to the level that is globalized, well understood across culture. So, and that's not the only thing that was used in the movie, just technology really stands out. And the elements that I found were the rites of passage, which basically is the fight scenes where he is not, the young king is not entitled to the throne. He has a degree of entitlement because he's in the bloodline, but he also has to fight to prove himself worthy of the throne, or everybody yields to him to continue to be king. And the next one is values. A lot of values there that were presented. Respect for elders was such a big one for me. I saw that there was a lot of respect for elders. Beliefs was also there. Tons of different belief, life after death, going into the ancestral plane, and talking to the fathers and to the ancestors, addressing them. And then a deity on the believing in God. We saw the Islamic religion, not necessarily the religion, but you saw elements in there that reminds you of Islam. And what else was it? I did not actually see things in there that reminded me of Christianity. I saw the native cultural belief system, and I saw the Islamic, little bit of the Islamic cultural belief systems. Oral tradition, as we mentioned, the beginning of the movie, just telling that story, is done reflecting the oral tradition language. There's verbal communication, there is verbal communications, there's different languages when we're in Korea, and the tribal languages in that place, the different tribes represented. And it's just a beautiful representation of different forms of language. And with technology, one scene that I liked a little bit was when they had what is it? When they had the computer generated voice actually pronounce the T's, rebooting. So those little details really stood out to me. Or when I heard Baku say, we will not have it to, those little details really stood out to me as somebody from the continent. Heritage, you talk about history, a lot of the history of slavery and how it has impacted the Black people in America and around the world. They talked about that marginalization and just how deep that historical part of it was, which I classify it under heritage. Then practices and norms, I picked up like the followership, the leadership, and the different activities that support followership and leadership, which generally is not a part of culture, but I boil it under practices and norms. So in general, looking at the Black Panther movie, I think these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements really stood out to me when it comes to the culture that the writers were trying to push. And yes, when I was talking about just that whole in-verbal communication, right? So I love the scene with Shuri, not because I think it's quite appropriate, but because it's done tastefully. You can see the mother's her back is turned, and the brother can see. So that age difference, they did in a way that they show respect for the mother, knowing that the two will not, it will not be appropriate for her to be doing something like that, or having a finger out like that in front of the mother. But the mother, being a mother, still knows what's happening and actually yells out to her to stop being inappropriate, or however you want to classify it. There is the clicking of the tongue. There is that is seen in the movie a lot, which I absolutely love. I cannot do the clicking of the tongue. I can do a little bit of click in maybe disapproval, or in acknowledgement, or in wonder, like, yeah, so things like that. I could do those little clicks, but I cannot do it while speaking. That is something that is common to that East African region, going towards South Africa region, as far as I know. Yeah, so I had mentioned about just how Mbaku says, we will not have it to, like that, having that emphasis, those little emphasis that reminds you of where people are from. And I could have sworn that he was from somewhere in West Africa just by how he delivered that line. And so this cross-cultural integration or intercultural integration falls under the TAUP model. And I just love that when it was done with respect to the community, to the culture, to the people. So there's that symbiotic relationship there where you see all the three generations standing right, not three generations, two generations age-wise. The brother has a different kind of authority, the mother has a different kind of authority, but you can still see that relationship between the brother and and Shuri, and the mother being in the middle, kind of balancing it out to like, don't be rude. You have to maintain respect and respect for your culture. So that's it for now. I don't want to say everything on the script, but it's just a taste, just to give you a general idea. I have a whole 30 minutes to 40 minutes presentation just on this movie. And Ryan Coogler did such an amazing job, and I shout out to him. He did a fantastic job. The writers, I have a lot of respect for the writers of the Black Panther. So the writing and directing is phenomenal. The one thing that I did not see in the Black Panther, where is the food? Where is the food? I don't know. As an African, I'm like, oh, where is the food? I want to see a rich culture of food. But I understand when you're writing, sometimes you have to prioritize, and I could not figure out where I would have placed the food. So I don't know where I would have placed the food. I thought maybe after the ceremony at the river, they could have come back and had a big party. But I guess it's assumed, right? But food. There's so much to say about food when it comes to the African culture. So if there's one thing I could have wished for, was to see the celebration and how food plays into that whole celebration. All right. We've already talked about cross-cultural stuff, being the language is really big, the music, being in Korea, hearing the rap music, the wig, seeing the warriors in the wig was just that was quite interesting cultural transfer right there or adoption right there. So I love the shake your wig, right? So it's they play it really fun, and it's lovely to see them adopting a different culture while in Korea. I think for this slide, that's all I really want to elaborate on. And then the last slide that I wanted to show you is that cultural relevance is profitable. Cultural relevance is profitable. So when making movies, it is important to really think about the context, really think about the culture of the characters, and really think about yes, you're thinking about the audience, the global audience, but it's also important to tell the story in a way that the particular group that you're trying to address is really highlighted beautifully, tastefully. And I loved it because it was refreshing to see a movie that is done that relates to Africa, and it wasn't about poverty and destitution and all of that. Yes, it was fictional. Yes, there's a lot of things in there that were different that we know it's not true. It's a comic, right? But it was beautifully done. And again, shout out to the writers, This was beautiful. So we know it made 1.347 billion. 1.37 billion according to IMDb 2022 posting. So it is profitable. It is profitable to make culturally relevant movies. It is profitable. kudos to you and keep going. If you want to talk more about my models or how I could analyze the culture of your company based on my models, reply to this message. My name is Dr. Ruth Akumbu, and reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we could discuss more. All right, there should be a link in the discussion area for you to reach out to me via LinkedIn. All right, thank you, and Wakanda forever.